I'm currently working on a koala bear, and as you can see, I've used a variety of different colors, watercolors, to actually create the shapes on the koala bear. So what I like to do is, I don't like to just use black when creating a koala bear. I like to mix up my own grays, and the way that I do that is I mix a red, a yellow and a blue together. And in this instance I've got a cadmium red, a cadmium yellow and a cerulean blue. I also like to mix up a purple, which is ultramarine blue, with alizarin crimson. You can also, if you do grays, you can then mix up, you can change up the red, yellow and blue, and when you mix all three of the primary colors together you get a variety of different grays, and I'll be showing you some of that at the end of the video. What I like to do then is, with the koala bear, I like to use a stippling. It's like a stippling technique where I use little dots and I put the dots quite close together. I then use a sparse, I put them in a sparse area so that they are just little hints of clumps of hair, and then I start joining them together in a bit of a squiggly manner, because they don't seem to have individual hairs. They seem to have very clumpy type of fur. It's very dense fur, and it looks like it's not very long. So I don't try and do individual hairs. I like to actually just make little ideas of these little clumps that make up a koala's thick fur coat. And this is how I do it. I go back in with a bit of water and I work little clumps in like this. See, and this is how I create the fur of a koala bear, with a little bit of stippling, a little bit of dots, and depending on which direction the fur is, you need to also have a look of the direction of the fur, so that you can shape the bone structure underneath, because that's very important to understand the structure of animals, and where their eyes are in conjunction to their nose, what type of nose that they have, what type of mouth that they have, and also to be able to use the shadows. So you would shade the areas and use your shadows and your shading to be able to create the form of the mouth, or under the eye and the eye socket over here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm using a little bit of a black gray, because as you move to this side, this is where the light is hitting from. So the shadow side is this side, the light side would be this side. So I would use shadow colors here, which is my blues and my purples, and also very darken these areas as well. That would need darkening. This area would need to be darker, and also this area would have less stippling in, because I want to have that highlight, or that area where there actually is going to be sunlight on the koala. And it's in watercolor. What we normally do is I put down some masking fluid over here. I'm not sure if you can see it on the video, but that masks out the white areas, because you don't use white in watercolor. You don't use a white paint. You use the color of the paper underneath as the pure whites. So you have to actually think about where the whites are before you start drawing or painting. And watercolor, you work normally from light to dark, whereas with oil paint you work from dark to light, as well as with acrylics you work dark to light. And that's the basic layering process of the various types of paint that you use. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start adding in a little bit of my blue, ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson mix, so that I can get my darks in as well, because they have little spots of dark areas. So I went and I did the layering of the lighter areas at the bottom, and then I come back and I work with a much stronger color. I don't put that much water in with this color now. If in watercolor, if you want to make it quite dark, then you must put less water in and more paint. So there I'm busy building up this section of the koala's face. And what I like to do is I like to take a cerulean blue, and in the shadow here, it's not quite white over here because this is falling into the shadow. I like to go and put the shadow color in where that white area is, you see, and then we're putting more of the shadow color in and spreading it so that it looks like a shadow. And I use ultramarine blue as well to darken certain areas, and I go over it. Once the paint is dried, I do a wash over the actual painting, and then when you do a wash over all the work that you've done, it actually unifies that area. So you try and do a wash in the entire area, and that will unify all the colors underneath. And that's how I paint. That's my painting technique. So I continue up at the top here. I have got masking fluid there, so the masking fluid will actually show up eventually. When I remove it, the whites will come through, so I'm busy painting over those areas now. If you'll see, I don't know if you can see on the video, the whites will remain, and I'm just busy adding in some of the color there. But I'm painting in very lightly, and I'm painting in lightly because I want to be able to work from light to dark. I want to be able to build up the layers and build up the colors. I do not recommend just using paints out of a tube. I do recommend that you try and mix up your own colors, because this makes your painting more exciting. Okay, I want to now start working on the ears. The ears are very fluffy, and what I've done is I have put masking fluid down so that it covers the white areas before I start. Now, a koala has got pink in its ears, so I like to just add a little bit of pink in. You can wet the area. You can wet the area where you want the pink to actually go. So you wet the paper. This is called a wet in wet technique, where when you put the paint in, the paint bleeds and flows wherever it needs to go, especially where the paper is wet. And wherever you've made the paper wet, that is where the color will go. If the paper is dry, the watercolor won't necessarily bleed down into that area. So I put in a alizarin crimson, a very light wash, so there's less paint and more water that I've mixed together. Then I go in and I use my alizarin crimson and my ultramarine blue, and I mix them together. As you can see, I mix them together and I create a purple color. And I'm going to use this color to put in my darks over here. And I use my photo reference and I add the long hairs. I use long strokes now because there are long hairs here. And I darken some areas over here. That's the base of the ear. And also watch the direction of the fur. Watch the direction that you're going to paint the fur, because now this is longer, there's longer hair here. Now because it's still wet here, it tends to bleed, so I'm not going to have very clear strokes of paint over here. But if you see, when I start working on dry paper, I can actually get a crisper line. And it depends on how you work. Some people like to work wet in wet, and they like to let the colors bleed. I personally like to control the paint a bit more, and I prefer to work dry and wet. Dry paper, wet paint. And as I move down the strokes, it's almost like a semicircle. That's how I do the strokes for the ears. And I'm always very aware of the direction that these the hair actually is. Now I'm going to add a little bit of black, diluted black now, over this. And let's see it darkens the area. And be careful of working over wet areas, because all it will do is it will smudge together. And I like to layer, so I layer when the paint is actually dry, and that's why I move around a lot, because I'm allowing areas to dry. This area needs to dry as well before I go back and I work in it. So that's why I work over quite a big area, is because I need to give the paint time to dry. Now they've got very fuzzy hair actually, so and it's very stringy at the end here. So I'm just randomly making long wavy types of lines here, because this is in between the white. So this is basically the shadows in between the white areas that I have created with my masking fluid. Okay, and I go in, and now I'm going to try and work back into this area here. It should have dried. You can always feel whether a place is dry, a piece is dry, if it's cool. So it's cool to the touch. If it's very cool, it means it's still wet. If it's not that cool, it means that it started drying again. And you can go back in and work the area. Okay, and be aware of your whites, very important. There are certain areas that are white, and try and keep that in mind when you're busy working these areas here. Okay, and like I said, try and work in a semicircle so that you are getting the direction of the fur right. Okay, very fuzzy hair. So fuzzy hair, it's not always straight. You might have to make some squiggly marks up at the top here, and that's how I make them. And then I come back and I work over these squiggly hairs here, and also see how long the hairs are, because in some areas it's a bit shorter, and then as you move out their hair gets a bit longer. So you can make this hair quite long because they've got really fuzzy ears over there. Now what I'm going to do with this alizarin crimson is I'm going to go in here and darken a section, because the light's coming here. There's going to be a patch here where the light is actually showing a little bit through on the ear, and this is in the inner ear, well, on the edge of the ear. It's actually a little bit darker, and then as you come down, the light is going to be hitting this patch and that patch over there. This is from this side, and then this is from lighting that will maybe be from the above. So, and there's a lot of white here, a lot of white, so you won't really see this pink. And I like to bring it down like that. So I go back into the paint and I pull the color down in little strips like that. Now just to darken that area, I'm going to add some of this color in now. Okay, so whilst it's wet, I'm now going to start just adding in the color at the top slightly, and then bleeding it down into the paint. And you'll see it gives a beautiful soft effect when you actually do this. So you go, and this is when you work wet in wet. Okay, and you can make sure that you leave space little white spaces for those extra hairs, and you can always come in and darken this. And you've got to work quite quickly when the paint is busy drying, especially in warm. I live in a warm country, so the paint tends to dry very quickly, and the paper dries very quickly, so I have to work quite fast, which can be a bit difficult sometimes. Now I'm going to try and see if I can use a different grey, just to give it a little bit of, depth. So if I just use the same colors over and over again, it's not going to really work. So now this is the colors that I'm using. I used lemon yellow, I used cerulean, and I used alizarin crimson to make this yellow. I mean this gray. So I'm going in and using this gray, as you can see, and it's more of a yellowy gray. It's not really a purple one. So it's a much lighter gray, depending on how much water you put in with it. See, and I go in and I work back into the purple color and mix it. So I like to do the layering process. I'm going to use a different gray now, the gray at the bottom that I created, and I'm going to try and work that in. And it will give a different dimension and feel to the painting. A variation of color is always very good. You're not trying to make a photograph, you're trying to make a painting. I love people who can paint photorealistically. I think they're absolutely amazing, and it's quite an art to do that. I paint a painting and I like to use the different colors, because I think that's part of watercolor, is to have the painting and use your colors really well. So here I'm going to add some more of the alizarin crimson and the ultramarine blue, and I'm putting a slight wash over here. Okay, now because of this patch here still looks a little bit light, I'm going to take a touch. I'm going to use a touch of cadmium yellow here. See why I say? Okay, so as I was saying, I'm going to now use some of the gray that I mixed up, and I'm going to darken this area, because this is the lip of the ear, and that part is in shadow. So it's very important to remember where your light and dark is. So this area would be in shadow, the light is coming from the other side, that side will have highlights, and then this side will also some of the hair sticking out, so it won't be in shadow, it will have a lot of light on it. So I'm going in and I'm darkening some of the hairs here, because this is a darker area, it's in shadow. Okay, I know with smaller brushes, I'm using a really small brush, so you have to try and get water. You have to go back and use there's quite a few times you have to go back and put water on your brush. Okay, I like to use, it's actually a 000 brush, so it's a very fine brush, and that's the type of brush that I want to use. Okay, the masking fluid here seems to be dry now, so I'm going to use a very light gray color. That means that when I'm using the color, that's very strong. There's more color than there is water. So if I want a lighter watercolor color, I just keep adding water just add some more water and it gets lighter and lighter. So now I'm going to use a very light wash with hardly any color in, because we want to be subtle. We really want to be subtle with the colors here. They can't be as dark as this side. They have to be lighter to give that sense of light and shadow. Now what I do is I add a little bit of cerulean over here, because when you'll see, I'll be putting some leaves at the back, and this cerulean will be for the leaves that are showing through the hairs over here. Okay, now at the base of the ear here, where the eardrum starts, and it's much darker, so I'm adding some long hair here, because there's long hair here. Okay, and then at the back here, I'm not going to put a lot here, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the leaves at the back to create the shape over here, and I don't want to put any lines over here. I want to use the leaves at the back to create the border here, so that this leaves a white edge, and I'll show you how I do that later on. I just wanted to show you how I'm doing the ears here. So remember to put in long lines. There's long hair over here, but I put the lines in very sparsely. They are far away from each other. I'm not doing it as close as I would over here. Okay, and then at the top here, I'm going to use very, very light colors. You can use a dry brush. And dry brushing is something that you can use in painting, so that's very wet, but you can dry the brush and just come back and use the brush. See, it can create a very different effect when you use a dry brush. So you can actually load the brush with pigment, and then take some of the pigment off, dry the brush, and then come back and then use this dry brush technique just to put the pigment on. Take some of the liquid off. You can use a paper towel, and then just add in some of that dry brush in there. Okay, so just to finish off this koala's face, I'm just going to add a little bit more detail down here. I'm going to stipple, make the whites of the eyes surrounding the eyes stick out a little bit. Let's put a little bit more detail in here, short little hairs, to create the idea that there's some hair over here. Do a few little darkish hairs here. Okay, and then this is where his cheek is, so we create a little bit of a indent there. This is where his jaw comes out a little bit. Okay, and what we want to do is now for his nose we need to put a little bit more detail in. Okay, so I'm going to work the detail in now. I'm going to use my purple color, my alizarin crimson, and my ultramarine blue. Now we've got to just do a bit of stippling there. Let's just fix some of the color here around the mouth area. Here's his mouth. Now the nose area is a little bit in shadow, so we'll have to put some shadow in over here, and I'm just using water. I'm just using water as I've done before, and pulling the pigment from the side, and I'm pushing some of the pigment with the water. I don't always put color in. So now I'm having a look and see this should be in shadow. This part should all be in shadow. So I'm just using water, pulling pigment from around it, and then this one will be in shadow here, and there will be that small area of light that is coming from the other side. And remember his chin or her chin, got to just darken it slightly, not too much. So because it's very dark here, I'll just take water now and spread it. I'm just using water, I'm going in with water. Okay, only water. And then I create that chin. And you can take the color and you can just spread it out, spread it some more so that it becomes harmonious. Okay, so there. Now I just feel that this nose needs a little bit more color, so we can do a slight wash. It needs a slight wash. Remember, the light is from this side, the dark is on the other side, so I'm concentrating on the dark areas, just adding in color, some gray. Can add more gray in, and then just come in and work it with some water. Okay, just work some water. Now I just use water here to soften the lines. Okay, you can push the pigment back as well into the areas that are really dark. And you can use the pigment that's already there and spread it. Okay, so there is your koala. It still needs a bit of work, but that is the basics of creating the koala. Just gonna go in, add some more highlights and that in here. Okay, shadow area, just a little bit of shadow area here. Okay, darken some of the areas just so that this area pops out, because that's the area where the highlights are going to be. And I just work in, go with water, just using just water and the pigment underneath to create a layer, small layer, a very light layer over here. Okay, so as you can see, that highlights this area here. So there's the light over there. And what we can do is we can, just to finish it off, let's take some of this masking fluid off. I'll go back and put some more masking fluid in when I start putting the background in, but I just want to see how this will look without masking fluid. So to define that ear just a little bit, I'll go in with some very light color and just lightly put in the ears, the hairs over there, just to define this ear, and that will give me a basis for when I want to put the background in. Okay, and then just at the top here, just lightly with a bit of water, just water, I put in a little wash at the top there. And you can make this as dark or light as you feel you want to use it. I mean, if you think it looks better a little bit darker, you can go in and darken certain areas, you know, because if you feel there's more shadow here, I just want to round out this face a little bit more. I'm going to put a wash in here because there's still some masking fluid over here. And it must look cohesive, even if you have different colors. It must look like it is one koala bear. It's like one face. The face mustn't look totally disjointed. So I use the washes and I continually go over the face with the washes. You can come in and do darker little highlights, shadow. Okay. I would make this area a little bit darker. To get the shape of the face, because at the moment we seem to have lost the shape of the face over there. Okay. Okay. I'm gonna do this. Make this just a bit darker there. Then I'm gonna wait for it to dry, and I'm going to take out all the masking fluid on this side as well. And you can carry on building up the color. It's very important to build up your color. As you can see, it's a layering process. And if you feel that some areas are too blue, you can come in just with a gray. That's a bit dark, so I just get some water, clean water on my brush, and I just start moving that pigment around. So don't worry if it's too dark. You can actually just spread out that dark pigment. Okay, and you continue, you just add water and you put the washes in. Do you see how you solidify the washes? And if you have a wash, continue to put washes over of the same color. The wash, if the wash is the same color, it will unify the picture. See how it unifies the picture now. And so your last final wash will be one color, and it can be the color that the koala bear is, a gray, so that you actually just, all the other colors underneath actually become, you know, they're part of the whole koala. Okay, and that's it. That's for now what I wanted to show you and how to create a koala. Thank you.